Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
What's going on? Welcome in to the Matt Bernier Show. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Today is Friday, May the 26th, 2017, the week following the Preakness Stakes. We'll get into the Preakness in a little bit. If you're watching live.drf.com, livestream.com, YouTube or Twitter, not YouTube, I should say, Twitter or Facebook, social media-wise, thank you for doing so. If you check it out, podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. Plenty of ways for you to find this show if you are so inclined. Again, social media, you can fire away, whether it's on Twitter at Bernier_Matt, or if you're watching on the Periscope feed, or if you're watching on Facebook on the Daily Racing Forums Facebook page. Today's show, going forward in the second segment, we'll talk about the Preakness and we'll dive into that in depth. The end, we'll go over two races coming up this weekend, this Saturday, I should say. Go over a couple of things. Maybe we can find a couple of winners, smoke something out there. But I wanted to start off with a little bit of an odd topic, and you're going to need to bear with me. This isn't normal as far as the way that we normally open the show, because this is almost an open-ended question. Yesterday's edition of Out of the Gate is up now. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well, and we'll lead right into it. That will follow this show right here on live.drf.com. But we talked about in the Hot Topics segment, and without giving it all away, we talked about who the top 3-year-old right now is, and I believe we had 3 different opinions and 3 different answers at this stage in the game. It's so early. These 3-year-olds will kind of sort themselves out as time goes on. But the bigger piece that it made me think of what defines what we're talking about as far as top or best or greatest, and it carried over into last night as my Boston Celtics got their doors blown off and put a bow tie on their season. The Cavaliers go on to their 3rd straight NBA Finals against the Golden State Warriors, and the whole LeBron, Michael Jordan argument, who is the greatest of all time. And, you know, I started throwing some comments out on Twitter and had some good feedback with people back and forth. But it just made me think everyone has different criteria to what truly defines great. Let's start off with the NBA topic, where you've got LeBron and Jordan. To me, it's very difficult to compare the two because I feel like they do two fundamentally, they do different things at their best. Jordan is obviously one of the best defenders of all time. He's one of the most clutch players of all time, and he's one of the greatest scorers of all time. I'm not diminishing other things that he did. He could rebound as a 2 or a 3 and all these different things. I'm not going to get into all the details there. But you look at somebody like LeBron James, who is much more of I'm going to call him, I don't want to say well-rounded because it makes it sound like I'm knocking somebody like Jordan, but it's the idea of, I think he can do more things. He can play all 5 positions on the floor. Michael Jordan could not play the 4 or the 5. Size-wise, just physically, he couldn't do that. So isn't it kind of comparing apples to oranges as opposed to apples? Wouldn't you be better off? And the way that I look at it anyway, I know some people disagree, but this is just my piece. And again, fire away on social media, agree, disagree, whatever it may be. I feel like someone like LeBron is much closer to Magic Johnson, where Magic could play all 5 positions. He could run the point. He could also play the 5. He could do so many different things. He could post you up. Not that Jordan couldn't, but just physically, I feel like they are much more comparable as opposed to, let's just say, someone like Jordan and Kobe Bryant, where physically very, very comparable. They do similar things. Their game is of the same style. To me, that's a more normal or useful argument. The greatest of all time, it's too early to tell. I sort of tried to tie it back into racing here, and we talk about recently anyway, we've got horses like American Pharoah and Arrowgate, and going back through the years, you've had, whether it's Seattle Slew or Secretariat or any of these different horses that people think Spectacular Bid, in recent memory anyway, and I'm not including going way, way back, but that's part of the game, that's part of the discussion. What is to say that the greatest horse that we've ever seen wasn't a sprinter? And to me, immediately, that's a tough thing to sort of compare and contrast because a sprinter does something fundamentally different than a route horse does. So from a talent standpoint, I can sit here and say I think Michael Jordan and LeBron James are equally as talented. They can do incredible things with the basketball and on the basketball court. But to me, it's a tough comparison between the two. Then everyone brings up just sort of the default and the de facto, championship, 6 rings as opposed to 3. LeBron maybe gets his 4th year coming up. And this ties us back into Out of the Gate, where I brought up, at this stage in the game, I think Always Dreaming should be considered the top 3-year-old, even with his most recent bomb in the Preakness, which again we'll get into in a little bit. But simply because he has 2 grade 1s, and that is one more grade 1 than anyone else as a 3-year-old thus far can say. And it almost is contradictory for me now here, sitting here saying, I think, well, LeBron, you shouldn't be knocking someone because of just strictly on championships. All of a sudden, that would mean, who was it? Robert Horry. Doesn't he have something stupid like 7 championships? He's never going to be considered one of the greatest players of all time. He's came up with some clutch shots, but he's far, far from being one of the all-time greats. Bring it to the NFL. Everyone immediately wants to put Tom Brady now, or not everyone, but most people would acknowledge that Brady is one of the top 2 or 3 of all time. Is it him? Is it Montana? Or is someone that gets completely slighted like Dan Marino because he never won a championship? What's to say, is that the only thing that's the separator? And then you tie in all these other pieces where they're team games, they're team events where one player, in basketball maybe it's a little bit different. We've seen that with LeBron where he carried just dumpster fire teams to the finals. But in football, you need to have, you need to have good players surrounding you on offense and skill positions. But keep in mind, it's 2 sides of the game. The defense, if the defense is trash, you're not going to have any chance. I just think there are so many, I'm curious, and again, this is going to be sort of just a never-ending discussion with any sort of sport. You're going to find that. Last night, Sidney Crosby, he moves on to another finals with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Is he ever going to be considered in the same breath as a Gretzky, where everyone thought he was the next thing? Well, you're going to have the old school people that say, well, no, you didn't get to see him. That to me is a bogus argument, that because I wasn't alive for watching someone in their prime, it doesn't mean that I haven't seen tape of them or seen what they were capable of doing. And long story short, I want to tie it back into racing. How do you define what the best is? Everyone's going to have their own criteria, but I'm just curious to know, do most people look at it and say, I know what I'm seeing, I know how good this horse is? Or do you look at it and say strictly on accolades alone? And we're not going to find out. This is sort of a possible point of contention for many voters in the Eclipse Awards down the line. But I brought up a few weeks ago here in the office, and we'll talk about it here momentarily, or right now I should say, before we cut the break. If Always Dreaming had won the Preakness and he went on to win the Belmont Stakes, and then later on in the year he matched up with Arrogate, and Arrogate ran the table going into the Breeders' Cup Classic, and Arrogate won that race, who wins Horse of the Year? Because we've seen over the past handful of years, it's been more about overall body of work, where what you've accomplished outweighs maybe talent, where a number of years ago, California Chrome and Shared Belief, and even Byron, if you wanted to throw him into it. Talent-wise, I'm of the opinion Shared Belief was always a better horse than California Chrome. He didn't have the credentials that California Chrome did, because Chrome had a Derby and a Preakness to his name. He also had another grade 1 that was on the turf in the Hollywood Derby. You look at last year with Arrogate and California Chrome. On the racetrack, it was settled. Arrogate was better than California Chrome, but because California Chrome had all the accolades and had all the sort of different things, whether it was Dubai World Cup and all these other races that he had won, he gets the nod over Arrogate. But anyone sitting there saying that they think California Chrome is a more talented horse than Arrogate, I hate to just say this because it sounds like I'm not listening to anybody else's case, but I think you're just flat out wrong. Arrogate is a more talented horse than California Chrome. It doesn't mean Chrome is a bum, but it's a fascinating argument to me. And again, yesterday, when it started with the 3-year-old discussion on Out of the Gate, which you can find on video.drf.com and YouTube, and then for me, it just continued on into the evening, watching basketball and talking about LeBron and Jordan and Magic and Kobe, and I brought up the big men. Why aren't they ever considered, whether it's Wilt or Kareem or Russell or any of these sort of things? It's just an interesting argument and an interesting discussion that I'm always fascinated with. And it was just something that I kind of figured this is a little bit of a light week, and it was top of mind, and it will be top of mind continuing forward into next week. I'm sure if the NBA Finals shape up the way that hopefully they will, and the Golden State won't just dump truck Cleveland. Anyway, just wanted to get that out there. Again, if you have any comments, you agree, disagree, whatever it may be, fire away on Twitter @Bernier_Matt or on Facebook, any of these other social media venues. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll dive into the Preakness. We'll dissect that a little bit, see how everything went down, if everybody had sort of excuses and possibly horses to look forward to in the Belmont Stakes 2 weeks from now. And then later on, we'll go over a couple of races coming up tomorrow afternoon. Stay with us here on the Matt Bernier Show.
Well, the amazing thing about our work was just how similar he is to Uncle Mo. Right away, of all of Rapoli's babies, he stood out as the most advanced, the most precocious, and the most talented, and that was exactly the same thing we'd seen few years before with Uncle Mo.
Outwork wins it for John Velasquez.
To be able to win a Grade 1 like the Wood Memorial in only his 4th lifetime start was very impressive.
It is Outwork in front.
California Chrome, straight and strong. Absolutely sensational. California Chrome. California Chrome. To California Chrome. All the way to the Kentucky Derby. California Chrome wins impressively.
He's gone into overdrive. California Chrome wins the Dubai World Cup.
One of the greatest performances you'll ever see.
Chrome turns to gold.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Well, the amazing thing about Outwork was just how similar he is to Uncle Mo. I mean, right away of all of Rapoli's babies, he stood out as the most advanced, the most precocious, and the most talented, and that was exactly the same thing we'd seen a few years before with Uncle Mo.
Outwork wins it for John Velasquez.
To be able to win a Grade 1 like the Wood Memorial in only his 4th lifetime start was very impressive.
It is Outwork in front.
12:12 on the east, 9:12 on the west. The Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, Twitter and Facebook. We had a comment on Facebook talking about Arrowgate and the Travers. There was no doubt in Bill's opinion that Arrowgate is one of the most talented horses that he's seen in the past handful of years. I mean, I tend to agree. It's hard for anybody, I think, to argue when you see. I'd like to think that when you see greatness, you're willing to acknowledge it. Maybe that's part of the thing that's kind of sticking with me about this whole LeBron thing. People saying he's not clutch X, Y, and Z. To me, that's crap. The man goes out and all he does is dominate basketball games. But we're done with that topic. I'm sure I'll revisit that at some point down the road when the time is appropriate. Let's take a look back at what happened last Saturday afternoon. The attention of the racing world was in Baltimore, Maryland, Pimlico Race Course. It was the 142nd running of the Preakness Stakes. Always Dreaming was going into it in search of the second jewel in the United States Triple Crown. Classic Empire seemed like he was the most likely upsetter to the race. I thought Cloud Computing was an interesting sort of longer price, and he was my pick in the race. Dave Rodman from the top of the lane.
Quest more money. Guinevere is trying to gear up on the inside, but is under a drive, and they're into the stretch here at Pimlico, and Julia Leperoux and Classic Empire have a 3-length lead, but Cloud Computing on the outside is coming with a run. Cloud Computing outside keeps on coming. Classic Empire, Cloud Computing, head-to-head down to the line. Cloud Computing wins the Preakness.
Great call from Dave Rodman. As always, Cloud Computing gets his nose down on the wire ahead of Classic Empire to win the Preakness for Chad Brown, Javier Castellano, Klarovich Stable. It was a fascinating race. We're going to take a look at the horse profile for Cloud Computing right now, your winner of the Preakness. It was his second lifetime victory. He only had a maiden score to his name prior to that. But the interesting thing now is where do we go from here? Because boy, this 3-year-old division, as we'll talk about, as you guys will see in a little bit on Out of the Gate, the 3-year-olds, boy, topsy-turvy. Every week it seems like there's a new face that shows up and kind of tries to take the division over. And it'll be interesting to see going forward what these horses continue on doing. You see all the connections there for this horse, Cloud Computing, by McLean's Music. Sneaky, the people that may be the most happy or have the most to gain by this victory, Hillendale, where McLean's Music stands, and I would be stunned if you saw that $8,500 tag next year from McLean's Music. This was his first group of 3-year-olds, and he's already got a classic winner. Cloud Computing is a nice horse for Chad Brown. He got a 102 Beyer speed figure in this event. Going forward, it sounds like the Belmont Stakes is off the table for this horse. I think that's the right call. It sounds like Saratoga is what the campaign is going to be. It'll be maybe a Jim Dandy into the Travers situation. The Travers is a big race for Chad up. He's a Saratoga boy. I believe Mechanicsville is where he grew up. So totally makes sense. You understand that. Put the horse away. Still lightly raced. Upside, unlimited. You don't know how good this horse can be. Classic Empire, the case can be made that he is the most consistent 3-year-old that we have thus far as these route races are concerned. And I hear a lot of people giving up on these 3-year-olds as a whole. simply because they just, you've had a new winner after a new winner after a new winner in all of these big, marquee events. To me, that's very, very unkind. It's much too early to be judgmental about the entirety of a generation. Keep in mind, we're at the last week of May. We have a long, long way to go before we find out just how good these 3-year-olds are. And I also think that's unkind to the horses that don't want to go this far but are very, very talented, whether they're sprinters or they're one-turn milers or turf horses or anything like that. So, Cloud Computing, nice horse. Classic Empire, consistent. The Derby winner. What the heck happened? I hate to just throw this out there, but I really believe that you can look at this and say, Pletcher on 2 weeks, this is not what he does. He's made it clear, abundantly clear. He doesn't like to run horses back with less than 4, 5, 6 weeks of rest between races. He was kind of in a position where if he did not run Always Dreaming in a race like the Preakness, the outrage, the public backlash would have been astronomical, and it wouldn't have looked good for Pletcher, not just for himself, but from a business standpoint. We need to have the best horses running on as often as they possibly can. So I understand why he may not want to run horses on 2 weeks, but he's a sportsman. He goes on and he does it, and the horse throws in a complete dud. He never picks his feet up. If you listen to all the reports leading up to the Preakness in the mornings, he was full of what. He was feeling himself, Always Dreaming, the same way that he was leading into the Kentucky Derby. So I don't think you can use that as the excuse. But I do think there's something to looking good in the morning when you're doing light exercise. And then how do you look when it's really time to get after it? It's no different than if you go to the gym and you have a hard workout one day and 2 days later or a day later, you feel okay and you can do, whatever it may be, if you want to go for a jog or anything like that. But if you really tried to get after it, you're not going to have nearly what you had in the tank 2 or 3 days before when you had that prior workout. And I feel like that's very comparable to what happened with this horse, Always Dreaming. Just my opinion. Maybe we'll find out that something else has happened to him and he wasn't feeling good, wasn't feeling up to snuff. But I just think this horse had a really difficult race in the Kentucky Derby. When I say difficult, I mean he ran. He ran, they emptied out the tank. There was no reason to save anything else. Get after it. He went on with it. And I think he probably bounced a little bit. I'm going to use the B word. I know a lot of people don't believe in the bounce theory. I do. I think it can take a lot out for the reason, the sort of analogy I just made. You go to the gym, you work out. If you're playing some sort of a sport, you have a hard workout. The next day, the legs, maybe they're not there. Maybe the chest isn't there. Maybe the arm isn't there if you're a pitcher or you're playing baseball. It takes a little bit of time to recover. This horse ran a giant race 14 days prior to the Preakness. And I think he probably felt the effects of it because he offered zero resistance. This thing, you knew he was in deep water going into the far turn. Round in the far turn, headed for home. It was a matter of, is he going to hit the board or is he just going to be up the track? And in fact, he was up the track. Now you have other horses that exit this race. And you have to start thinking bigger picture down the road. What are we looking at? You have horses like Looking at Lee and Senior Investment. Sounds like they're going to go on to the Belmont Stakes. Sounds like you may also have Conquest Mo Money running in a race like the Belmont Stakes. Classic Empire going to the Belmont Stakes, where he will likely be a prohibitive favorite. Even with the new shooter coming in from overseas in Japan, Epicharis, sounds like he'll be shipping over here in the near future. You have horses like Cloud Computing, where we already talked about it. Sounds like Saratoga is going to be the path for him, whether it's a Jim Dandy Travers situation or if they choose to get aggressive and they go to the Haskell. But I'd be surprised because it sounds like Chad wants to send Timeline down through the Haskell. After that, Always Dreaming, he deserves a little bit of a breather here. And I think, if you're writing this horse off, I think you're making a very, very major mistake because we've seen what he's capable of doing at his best. And in racing, we are very, very guilty of writing horses off after one bad effort. We've been spoiled by the likes of American Pharoah and California Chrome and Arrowgate and Beholder and Zenyatta and Rachel Alexandra. They don't all run and they don't all win every time. I think we get a little bit spoiled when a horse delivers a subpar effort. That doesn't mean all of a sudden they can't pick their feet up anymore. Maybe that's something to just keep in the back of your mind going forward with a horse like Always Dreaming in whatever race he shows up in next. Buttons up the Preakness coverage for us. We're going to take a break here on the Matt Bernier Show. When we come back, 2 races to go over this Saturday afternoon. One of them north of the border at Woodbine, one of them in Southern California at Santa Anita. Stay with us.
The Breeders' Cup Classic. Benjamin! 5 Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Shall win the winner of the John Handicap.
This horse is the complete package. He's won from 7 furlongs to 1.1 miles. He's won on dual surfaces. He's won with and without Lasix, and he's traveled around the world and brought his A game with him.
He showed that he was a very top-class dirt horse.
Balance is key, and he was just perfectly proportioned. I think that's what made him so athletic and so efficient on the track.
California Chrome, straight and strong. Absolutely sensational. California Chrome. California to California Chrome. Away to the Kentucky Derby. California Chrome wins impressively.
He's gone into overdrive. California Chrome wins the Dubai World Cup.
One of the greatest performances you'll ever see.
Chrome turns to gold.
12:22 on the East, 9:22 on the West, the Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV. Let's dive into a couple of races that will be coming up tomorrow afternoon. And we're going to go not just coast to coast, we're going to go country to country. We're going to go north of the border first off, our friends at Woodbine. We're going to take a look at the Nassau. This is one of 2 stakes races on their card tomorrow afternoon. One of them is ungraded. This one happens to be of the grade 2 variety. Let's take a look at that field if we could. Not a big field, but you've got some pretty salty runners in here and some names that we are all familiar with. For those of you that are new to this show, on the far right side, those are my odds, not a morning line. It is my own value line, what I think is fair value on each one of these runners in post position order. Stormy Victoria, 4-1. Catch a Glimpse, 3-1. Involuntary, 8-1. Karen, 9-1. Shelby Smile, 5-1. Southern Gem, 10-1. Starship Jubilee, 12-1. This is an interesting race. I think Catch a Glimpse is going to get bet off the board. I mean, I think she's going to take a significant amount of money. She has run successfully up at Woodbine. Woodbine's turf course, not the easiest one to navigate, particularly at a one-turn mile. The stretch goes on and on and on and on for days. I think people know the name. She's trained by Mark Cassie, who is perennially the leading trainer up north of the border. I think she has every right to win this race. The concern I have is the pace scenario. I think there is some other speed in here. You've got a horse like Karen, who I think at this point has to have the lead. I think she has to go. I think Involuntary is not going to be far off the pace. She figures to be forwardly placed. And Starship Jubilee, I think, is a little bit overmatched on paper, but she has one way to go, and that's forward. So I think this thing could possibly heat up a little bit on the front end. And if it does, there are 2 horses in particular that I think it benefits the most. I think it benefits the number 1 Stormy Victoria, and I think it benefits the number 5 Shelby Smile. You will see that my live long shot, air quotes, because I don't know what price she's going to be, is Shelby Smile. She is also my pick in this race. The reason I prefer her over Stormy Victoria, this is no disrespect to the connections of Stormy Victoria. Christophe Clement, we know he does a fantastic job. I think Stormy Victoria has got quite a bit of hang in her. I don't think she wants to go by. You look at her overall record in North America, her 2 victories are by a neck and by a head. And boy, she has had numerous instances where it looks like she's going to go off and win by 6. And she doesn't even pass the leader. To me, that's just such a tough horse to trust at a short price. Going a one-turn mile up at Woodbine, she should get a very, very good setup in this spot. I just don't trust her as far as I could throw her at a short number. Stormy Victoria, if she wins, I will tip my cap to those of you that had her. I don't want her in here. I wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole at a short price. Shelby Smile, probably a little bit slow right now on paper, but she's proven at the one-turn mile at Woodbine. She won a stakes race last year up there. Her return effort at Keeneland, I thought, was just fine over yielding ground. May not have been visually spectacular, but she got a great trip. She should get another very good trip here, and if the rain does develop here this afternoon at Woodbine, it's supposed to clear up tomorrow. But if there is rain and the turf course has a little bit of give in it that only plays into the hands of Shelby Smile, I think she is an interesting, again, air quotes, live long shot, because I don't know what she's going to go off at as a price, but she is my pick in the Nassau. Let's go to Southern California. You've got 4 graded stakes races on that card, highlighted by the Gold Cup. It's a grade 1 going 1.25 miles, but I'm going to take a look at one of the downhill graded stakes races. Let's take a look at the Monrovia. This is for fillies and mares going down the hill. And you've got an interesting field here. I don't think there are any standouts, maybe with the exception of Illuminant, who we'll touch on momentarily, but in post position order, the number 1 is Swift Lady, 13-1, the 2 Spyring, 13-1, the 3 Watch This Cat, 9-1, Illuminant, 7-2, Kanaya, 19-1, Juno, 8-1, Paquita Coqueta, 12-1, Enola Gray, 4-1, and Anita Partner, 9-1. I think Illuminant is the most likely winner in this race. I have to be honest. I loved her. Anyone that has watched this show for any length of time knows how fond I am of this filly, and that I liked her quite a bit in the Jenny Wiley when she was taking on the big girls. She was taking on, Dickinson and Lady Eli and those types. And she had a perfect trip sitting just off of Catch a Glimpse, who we just talked about in the Nassau, and she offered absolutely nothing down the lane. It was a very, very disappointing effort, in my opinion. But having said that, I know what she's capable of, and I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't take a shot in the Grade 1 Gamely Saturday afternoon at Santa Anita. But when you hear the connections and the quotes come out afterward, where, you know what, they knew that Flavian Pratt was scheduled to ride Avenge in the Gamely. They knew that Lady Eli was shipping west. We know that Illuminant can run down the hill, and you get to keep Flavian. I understand why they chose to go this route. I think she's the most likely winner. I just wouldn't want her at too short a price, and I think she is going to take a significant amount of money. My live long shot and my pick in this race, it's a little bit of a quirky pick. It's the number 6, Juno. I made her 8-1. I don't think she's the likeliest winner by far. I thought her most recent start was something quite strong. She went out there and was laying down some legitimate fractions, going a route of ground. Now she turns back, and even with the turn back, I think she's the fastest horse in the race. I understand you've got Paquita Coqueta. I understand you've got Enola Gray in here. You've got a couple other horses that want to be forward. Kanaya, I think, is a need to lead type. Watch This Cat has some speed. I just look at it and say, Juno, I think she can throw down 21 if Kent really wants to go that fast down the hill. And I wonder if this is a perfect sort of example of, the jockeys and the trainers and the owners, they all handicap the race the same way you and I do. And I wonder if they're going to look at it, and this could be one of those classic examples of, look at all the speed, and maybe all the other connections decide, you know what, we can sit just off because there's going to be a duel in front of us, and maybe that duel doesn't develop, and if it doesn't, I think Juno goes right to the top. Say goodnight, Irene. I'm hopeful Juno can wire this field going down the hill in the Monrovia at Santa Anita Park tomorrow afternoon. A really fun day of racing at Santa Anita tomorrow afternoon. If you happen to be in the Toronto area, tomorrow morning, I should say, 11 o'clock, I'll be up there. I'm flying up to Toronto here in a few hours. I'm going to be moderating a panel with 3 major contest winners, and the seminar that we'll be doing has to do with tournaments. I will be joined by Tommy Massis, winner of the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge a few years ago. I'll be joined by Brian Troop, winner of the NHC a number of years ago, and also Ray Arsenault, the reigning and defending NHC champion. So it'll be the 4 of us. Those 3, they'll be the ones doing the heavy lifting. I'll just be trying to direct some traffic. If you are around the area of Woodbine, come on out. It's free. 11 o'clock is the start time. If you can't come out to the racetrack, you can watch it on Woodbine's website. They'll have the live feed up, so that should be fun. We'll have some fun up north of the border with our friends at Woodbine. Again, Santa Anita, big day of racing tomorrow afternoon. All sorts of graded stakes races, highlighted by the Grade 1 Gamely as well as the Grade 1 Gold Cup, going 1.25 miles on the main track. You have all sorts of different ways for you to find this show if you didn't catch it live. You have YouTube, you have SoundCloud, you have iTunes, you have video.drf.com. Heck, it may still be up on the Periscope site if you go on there. I don't know how the whole thing works, but I know that we run this thing live on social media with Twitter and Facebook, so maybe you can go back and catch it there if you really need to. If you want to fire away at me on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt. If you want to fire away on the video side of things on Facebook, feel free to leave some comments. I'll try to take a look at some of those as well. We also take a look at the comments underneath the videos on YouTube, which leads us into our normal new sort of segment coming up. Following this show, we will always from now on lead right into Out of the Gate. It is the weekend handicapping show here at the Daily Racing Forum. Dan Ullman, Mike Beer, myself, Nicole Russo, Craig Milkowski, Jonathan Kinchin, you name it, they're here. Peter Thomas Fornatow made an appearance this week as well, I believe. So you've got all sorts of good things. Next week's schedule for this show may be a little bit wonky. I have a wedding over the weekend, so this show may happen on Thursday, and it may happen remotely. You may not get all the bells and whistles visually, but we'll figure something out. I'll talk to the boys in the back. Without further ado, best of luck the rest of this weekend, and let's throw it into Out of the Gate.